Okay, so how did it proceed from the Arizona trip? Was there anything else about the Arizona trip that was important? Like,
I don't think so. So did we have the conversation that night in the living room with you guys before or after we went to the stake presidency?
Before.
That's what I thought.
Definitely before.
So talk about that.
Did you guys want to or me?
Both. Both. Go ahead. Madison.
I was just like completely shocked because they sat
What
us
happened?
down.
Yeah.
We were having family home evening.
It's, we're
So you're still doing family evening
Yes.
all this
I
time.
made people have family home
We're doing
evening.
everything.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah. And they sit us down and they just like spring this question on us like, what would you guys think if we quit going to church? And it was just like casually that they said it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's a super big deal. And my mom's like, yeah, it is a big deal. And then we just started talking about it. And my dad said like, yeah, I don't believe Joseph Smith is a prophet. And like, it was like relieving almost to finally just hear him say it, but it also hurt. But then my mom said, I don't believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. And I was just like completely shocked because I did not see that coming. Like, my dad had always been faithful, but in these last 2 years, like, we could see that he was becoming less faithful, but my mom was, like, the strong one. She was the one that still had her testimony, and when I heard that she didn't believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet, that, I guess, was my emotional break, because I realized, like, there's some real issues here, and not one, but two of my parents have, like, lost their faith.
Yeah. Okay. What was that like for you?
To see them lose their faith?
Yeah, to and have your mom validate it. Was it sad? Was it hard? Was it relieving? What did you feel when you kind of faced that reality?
It was definitely a hard night. Like, I was bawling my eyes out just because, yeah, so was my little brother Hunter, that we were just faced with this choice, I guess. And they said, it's up to you. Like, you can read whatever you want. We'll go to church if you want. If not, we don't have to go to church. And I'd never had that choice before. And in a way, it felt freeing to be able to have that choice. But it was also really scary that my whole life might change and go in a different direction. And that was never even, like, a topic in my head.
Okay.
That I did have a choice, I guess.
Interesting. So when was this meeting? This was
in April of 2018.
This is all still right after
Yes.
Arizona a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My faith crisis is super condensed.
Okay. So how'd your family handle this going forward after the parents broke the news?
Well, I was kind of like my mom. Like, I didn't want them to tell me anything that was anti-Mormon. Like, they talked about the CES letter, and I was like, well, how do you know that that's really true? And they're like, it's definitely true. Like, it's well supported and all this. But I felt like it was a sin to look at anything that was anti. And so I'd only let them tell me stuff that the church put out. And a lot of it was stuff that I'd already heard in seminary and things. But I was just hearing it in a different light because, like, I had that emotional break. And I was, like, finally willing to listen to it in a logical sense, I guess. With the idea that the church might not be true, because that was never an idea in my head before. And so these different things were just piling on, like, yeah, the Book of Mormon or the Book of Abraham is translated completely wrong, and there's multiple First Visions accounts and stuff like that. And just like those different things were piling on my shelf, I guess. And then they told me about the hat and the peepstone. And I just thought that was completely ridiculous. Like, if there was the gold plates, then what was even the point of them if he didn't even use them? And it just, the whole visual in my head of him just putting his head in a hat, like, why didn't he just go in a dark room or something? Like, it just seemed completely ridiculous to me. And at that point, I just, like, admitted to myself that the church wasn't true after all these things had been piling on.
Okay, so once you were open to considering the evidence fairly,
yeah,
it became obvious to you what?
That it wasn't true.
And well, what did you think about like how long it took you to like the fact that you couldn't see that before and then all of a sudden you could see it?
Oh, it's just crazy to me. Like, I just realized the bubble, like we were talking about, that I was in, and how I just didn't see any of it my whole life. And then 1 week and I listened to these things, and then I'm on board with them and I don't believe it anymore.
Yeah. Okay. And that took how long from that meeting until?
It was probably like a week or two, not long.
Couple weeks.
Yeah.
And you were 17 by that point?
Yeah.
So what's that like as a 17-year-old to have your entire spiritual, moral, existential framework evaporate in 2 weeks?
It was scary. Especially like 17 years old, you're about to go off on your own and make all these choices. And I was
It's the age your mom got married.
Yeah,
in the temple.
Yeah. And I was planning on making all those choices.
Were you going to BYU? Were you going to go on a mission?
BYU was never really my thing. I thought about like a mission a while, but I decided not to go on a mission. And
but you weren't planning on a mission to BYU before then?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
But yeah, like I wanted to go to a place that had a lot of Mormons in it so I could find like a good Mormon boy to marry.
So you did want to do the Mormon marriage thing?
Yeah, I definitely did. I wanted to get married in the temple. And that was one of those things, like when they first told me that they really came out and said, we don't believe. That was one of the things that I thought about, like, oh, I'm not going to have my parents in my wedding. And that was really hard because that's what I was thinking that I was going to go on. I was going to have a Mormon wedding and have a Mormon family and do all that.
So you have that dream evaporate.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about like all the standards you would, I'm guessing the law of chastity and the word of wisdom, if you were in this, if you follow what I assume, those things were super important to you. And all of a sudden you could question those things and you did or didn't have to follow them, right? Like,
yeah.
Was that weird to have those really strict rules all of a sudden be in play or in question?
It was definitely weird because I always followed everything that I could to the best of my ability. And like I had all these high standards and I did my best to keep them. But honestly, I think there's always part of me that kind of had like a wild heart and wanted to do those things. And when I was faced with that choice, like I could do those things, it was scary, but it was also an option to me, I guess.
Of course. Yeah, because it's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal stuff. Yeah, so I'm just guessing that must have been really crazy or hard or scary or exciting and all those things, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was the first one in my family to start drinking coffee.
And that's like edgy.
It was edgy.
And iced tea.
Yeah.
She's wild.
Iced tea? What? What?
Actually, it was
iced tea?
Yeah, one of his employees was like, try this coffee. And they're like, it's really good. I was like, okay. And my dad's like, I'm not trying that. My mom, she was crazy. She was like, oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to keep my standards. Why do I need to drink tea and coffee? And I'm like, what's the point of not drinking tea and coffee, Mom?
Yeah. The wiring runs thick.
Yeah.
Okay, keep
No,
going.
go ahead.
Anything else you want to say about kind of that crack for you? What about your siblings? Did any of them proceed or follow you, or
Yeah.
did you try and talk to them about this as you were going through it?
Well, my little brother Hunter was even faster than I was because, like, he kind of read about, like, the first vision and those things in, like, a better light than I did before they talked to him about it. And he had those things on his shelf. And so when they came out to him and told him that they didn't believe, it was just validating to him. And he was, like, on board right away. A little faster than me.
Did he tell you?
No, Hunter does not talk.
Oh, okay. So it's not like he came to you and said, hey, Madison, I don't believe anymore.
Not really. I mean, we were all just having, like, we talked about it night and day for, like, that whole 2 weeks.
Like the whole family?
The ones at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many were at home?
Me, Hunter, and then my older sister Taylor that commented.
Okay. So you and Taylor talked about it. How was Taylor?
We were all just talking about it together.
So how were you and Taylor experiencing this as siblings?
Well, honestly, Taylor was kind of going through a hard place in her life, and she wasn't really talking either.
Yeah, Taylor she had just found out she was pregnant and decided to get divorced.
Oh, wow. That's
And so
heavy
she was
stuff.
in some
Yeah.
pretty severe depression at the time.
So was she a temple marriage too?
Yes.
So
Yes.
divorce of a temple marriage and was pregnant.
Yeah, and being a single mom and
Was Faith Crisis part of that divorce or any
no,
of that? Oh, totally
no,
separate. Okay.
totally separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she was in a hard spot. So you didn't really
Yes.
have her to talk to, like
Yeah.
empathize with or anything.
Yeah, we really just talked together like as a family. We were just talking about all these issues, and like during those 2 weeks it was just so heavy, like all these issues, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like I have a real choice to make right now. And yeah.
So how did the 2 weeks end?
It was really with like what I was talking about with the hat and the rock, like it just sounded so ridiculous to me, and then it just started clicking in my head, like all these things aren't making sense, all these things don't add up because the church isn't true. And it just like a light went off in my head.
And was the CES letter something you read yourself, or did you listen to podcasts? Or
They were just like we would read parts of the Gospel Topics essay because I didn't want anything that wasn't like church approved.
So it was the essays themselves.
Yeah, and so then after that, like after I had that light in my head that the church wasn't true, just from that, then I would like start listening to other stuff and started reading like the CES letter.
Okay. I mean, if I'm trying to be objective for a second, it's like, well, you believed when your parents believed, and then you stopped believing when your parents stopped believing. Like, how do we know what's you and what's really your parents? Like, what if you're just following your parents?
That's something I've really struggled with, honestly, because I feel like that's how everybody sees me, is that I'm just this poor lost soul that her parents drug out of the church and she can't think for herself or whatever.
So if you were to make the case that it's not that, what would you say?
So that is why I removed my name, actually, because I wanted to show people, like I waited till I was 18 so they didn't have their names on it, like, and I wanted to show people that it was my decision and that I learned for myself, and this was something that was important to me and that I thought about.
So you don't think you did it because your parents wanted you to do it? No. I mean, a good argument for that is that you have other siblings, you have other children that still believe, right?
Yes, we have three
So I mean, obviously you could have followed your other siblings who are still believers.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like none of this would have happened if they didn't leave the church, and you can make that argument. But they were very like, we will go to church with you if you want. Like, you don't have to read any of this. And so I guess they just like gave me the option, and I chose this option.
Okay. And if someone were to say, okay, put your parents aside, why do you think the church isn't true? Why do you think or feel the church isn't true? What are your conclusions or your high level points or arguments or sort of conclusions around that? If you had to make your case, not to convince others, to express why it's real and authentic to you.
Yeah. Basically just because like of the things that I've heard about Joseph Smith, like the rock in the hat, and like the different first vision accounts, and like how the Book of Mormon is translated, and like all the problems with that. I mean, we're taught our whole lives like the Book of Mormon is the keystone of our religion, and if we don't have that, it all falls apart. If Joseph Smith isn't a prophet, it all falls apart, and it all fell apart for me because of those things.
So for you, the Book of Mormon, what?
It wasn't translated by God.
It's not credible.
Yeah, it's not credible.
And Joseph's character for you, his integrity, his life is what?
It is not something that I look up to, definitely. Like the whole story of just like the different first vision accounts just show to me that like the story isn't something that I can believe in. And then it was just validating to hear the other stuff that, you know, he was like marrying other men's wives, and he was marrying like this 14-year-old girl and that type of thing, just to hear just like his character.
What does that mean to you that he did those things?
Well, like I've always been taught to view Joseph Smith as this role model, and I could not do that anymore. Like it just made me sick to my stomach to hear those things. And
why? Well,
polygamy was like always a big part of my shelf that I had growing up. And no matter like what justifications people try to make for it, I can never justify it in my head of why God would do that. And so I just had to go with, we don't have all the answers and we'll figure out in the next life. And then after I was just told all these things that made the church like not credible and the story of the restoration not credible, then all those things just started making sense of why these terrible things were happening in the church, why there's polygamy and
all the persecution.
Yeah, all the persecution, like blacks in the priesthood, all those other problems, and yeah.
In some sense, it all as soon as it's not true, it all makes sense.
Yeah, it all just like the wheels start turning. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's like everything's really hard to fit, and then as soon as it's not true, it's like everything makes perfect sense. Uh-huh. Yeah. So ultimately, your conclusion about Joseph Smith's character was what?
It was a poor character.
Not someone that you'd want to follow or
yeah.
Okay.
And that was another reason that I left the church or removed my name from the church, was just because it wasn't an organization that I wanted to support. Like, these issues have been happening since the beginning of time, and there's still issues in the church, and I don't want my number and my name supporting that.
So there's truth claims and historicity stuff, but then there's also social justice issues like feminism and women's issues and LGBT issues and race issues. Were any of those part of your decision?
Ultimately,
did you or do you have sympathies for the LGBT community, for feminism and equal rights for women? Did any of that, or has any of that played into your decisions at all?
Ultimately, my decision was through the truth claims, but everything else was just validating to me.
Okay. So at some point, I mean, because they say millennials just love gay people. That's just how they are. Gay and lesbian people, they just accept and love LGBT people, period. Is that true for you and your generation?
Honestly, like, I'm ashamed to say this, but it wasn't in my nature.
What was?
To love LGBTQ people.
How did you think of LGBTQ people before your faith crisis?
I come from a very, very conservative family. And
so for you, if when you were 16, somebody said, oh, so-and-so's gay, what would you have thought or said?
I would have looked down on them and, like, we were taught family is man and a woman, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Okay, so you weren't like a typical millennial in that sense.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Oh, keep going.
So I guess it was just once I could let go of those beliefs, then I could see all the other issues.
So how did your views on LGBTQ people change?
I just had more sympathy, more love and acceptance for them.
And that's how you feel now?
Yeah.
And what about the role of women in the church and men versus women and feminism and that kind of stuff? Have you had an awakening in that area or not? Or
a little bit, not as much as like my mom and my sister. Like,
they're raging feminists.
Yeah.
Whereas you're just kind of like meh. Yeah, you're a mini feminist.
Women in the priesthood, like, I guess it just never really bothered me. And
well, who wants that, right? Who wants the priesthood, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think a lot of people probably look down on me in this area, just because, like, I think in our country, women have a lot of rights that we need to be grateful for, and I guess I'm just kind of grateful for those rights. And a lot of people see different injustices, and I mean, if there are injustices, those definitely need to be fixed, but I guess I'm just not like a raging feminist like my mom and my sister.
You're basically saying women and all people have a lot to be grateful for, so you don't see
I guess I just
big injustices now, or I mean, you see you have more to be grateful for as a woman than to complain about. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the church. There are, but
do you want a career? Do you want to be a housewife? Do you want to be a mom? Like,
I definitely want a career. Yeah, I'm going down to NMSU this fall to become a nurse. So
okay, so you want to be a nurse? And
yeah.
You want to. Do you want to be a mom? Do you want to have kids?
Probably.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, I definitely want to get married, and I mean, kids has always been a part of what I was planning on. Right. That hasn't really changed. But.
Really quick, did you ever try and talk about this stuff with your older believing siblings, and was there ever any conflict and or pressure from them for you to stay believing?
Oh my gosh, I tried to.
And if this is uncomfortable, I don't want to cause family conflict. No, so feel free to say I don't want to talk about it. That's all.
I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Well, I'll start by saying that they've definitely like come around, and I've been so impressed with how they've been acting now, and they've like showed nothing but love and compassion now. But at first, it was definitely really hard that I would try to talk to them, and they would kind of just shut me down and not want to talk about it. And that was really hard because I really wanted to talk to them about it. And then we did have, like, I had another conversation with my brother, and that he was just so worried for me that I was just like going off the deep end and just making all these changes, and that it wasn't good. And that was like really hard to hear. But it's definitely gotten better.
Your relationship with them?
Yeah.
How have you navigated faith differences with your older siblings now?
Just with tender love and care, I guess. Like, I think we've all kind of recognized some boundaries, and it's been very hard for like them to accept that we don't believe anymore. And I guess we just have to go about it in a loving way and not try to persuade them, because that never goes well.
Right. So is it 4 and 4? What's the body count?
3 and 3.
3 kids.
No, so it's
3 kids. So 5.
So it's 5 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's 5 non-believers now and 3 believers.
Those 3 believers have wives. So there's 6.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Plus we've
Okay,
got
so
plus
of
we
all
have
the
3
children,
babies.
parents, and in-laws, total number?
15.
Yeah, counting babies. We have 4 babies.
Okay, so let's not
Grandbabies.
count the babies.
Okay.
How many are there?
11.
11 adults and or, older
Yeah, Hunter
children.
will count Hunter as an adult.
And of the 11 adults, how many believe and how many don't?
So
6
and
believe
5.
and 5 don't.
So the believers still outnumber the non-believers
Yeah.
in the adults in your family. But it's about split.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the most part, I think some of us have a harder time than others of us dealing with it. But for the most part, we're getting to be in a really good place. Like for a while, it was pretty rough, but I feel.
Did you have any like family vacations or dinners where everyone's together and it comes up, or like it's awkward, or like if you had to deal with those kind of moments?
We've had some awkward moments, definitely. Yeah. But we just went on vacation. We went to Mexico, and it was beautiful. Like we didn't have any awkwardness, and it was just,
how do you settle? Are there rules? Are there guidelines, boundaries? How do you get to a healthy place as a mixed faith, broader family? You know what I mean?
right. So the main thing for them to know is that my love is absolutely unconditional. Like they know that there's nothing that I still wouldn't do for them, that I am still the same person. I just don't believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet. Like that doesn't change who I am. And I think that over the year that they've come to see that I'm still mom, I still love you. And it's like love has been the key in our family.
So they feel your unconditional love. Mm-hmm. That's huge.
And they're reciprocating it back. At first it's difficult. And I was talking to my mom this week about that, is that, when you go through a faith crisis, you grieve your faith, but the people around you grieve your loss of faith as well,
Right.
and you have to give space for people to grieve that, and to let them be angry, let them feel what they're going to feel, and just give them love in return. So.
Okay. So a base of unconditional love. How about how you rules around talking or not talking about the church?
It just gets awkward. Like if Jared, he's usually the one that likes to be more aggressive about stuff like that. I like peace, so I'm not going to bring anything up that people don't want to talk about. They just get quiet and they don't talk about it. And then we know that conversation was quick and short, and probably Jared was the only one that participated in it.
And I mean, on the one hand, I want to think not talking about things is always dangerous and harmful, but the truth is that's probably good, right?
Yeah, because here's the bottom line is we're not going to change their mind about that. And that's not that's not a goal that we have anyway,
Okay, so that's interesting. So as a non-believer, you don't have the goal to take away the belief of your believing children.
No, absolutely
Why not? Like, these parents come to be frantic. My kids are in a cult, or my kids are being brainwashed, and they're going to be destroyed if they stay Mormon. And I always try and say, stop that. Like, there are way worse. There are a billion worse things in the world than being Mormon.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they love their lives. They're in the Mormon bubble. They love their lives, and
they may be offended to hear you refer to it as a bubble from their perspective.
But I was right there with them, and so and I loved my life, so I can.
But you're saying they love their Mormon lives. I'm just helping you a tiny bit.
Okay, thank you.
They love their Mormon lives.
Yes.
Okay.
They do, and I don't know if and when they get ready, I'll be here for them, and they know that.
But you're not worried that they or your grandbabies will be raised Mormon?
Nope. Because I guess bottom line is I'll always be Mormon. You know, you can't really ever get that out of you. So.
And you like yourself, right?
I like me. So it'll work out.
I think I'm a little bit more confrontational than she is, and so they've had a more difficult time with me. For one, I'm the one that started this whole train wreck.
Yeah, it's your fault.
You know, and so I drug everybody out, and I mean, I'm completely honest, and I'm fine with them staying in the church if it makes them happy. But kind of my perspective is, and this is with everybody, if the Mormon lifestyle makes you happy and everything, then do it. But I just feel like people deserve to know the truth. And then once you know the truth, then make a decision. And if that's what you decide, then good. And so I tend to be a little bit more, you could say, confrontational, but I'm not really confrontational, but I want to have discussions with people. And so I can only deal with silence for so long. And then I'll bring things up, and I'll make our family have the awkward conversation if we have to.
Okay. So how do you feel about, so overall, are you at peace with your older children and grandchildren being in the church?
I am, because
how have you dealt with that?
I am. Obviously, I wish that they were all with me, obviously. You know, if I'm being truthful, that would be my wish.
Why?
Just because I think I'm right. I mean, I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You know, and I like to be right. But at the same time, they think they're right. And so I can respect that. And I can respect their beliefs, and I do. And so I'm not gonna force anybody to do anything, and I'm happy for them. If they're happy, that's all that I care about. At some point in their life, if things get difficult and they might have a change of heart, then I'll be for them. I'll be there for them, or I'll be here for them.
So what about they'll be taught sexual shaming, or they'll be taught to self-loathing with masturbation, or they'll be taught that it's the one true church and they're going to be taught to hate me or look down on me because I've lost my faith, or I'll be excluded from ordinances, or they'll be taught that LGBT people are bad. Like, non-believing Mormons will go through this big list of all the toxic, damaging, awful things that your children and grandchildren will be exposed to, including disrespecting half their family. How do you get over that and not have that? Like, I know you may share a little bit of those concerns, but not enough to be militant.
Exactly. And that's the point, is that for 50 years of my life, I lived that life, and it wasn't necessarily damaging to me, you know? And so I think they can do the same thing. And I think a lot of members of the church can do that. I think that they need to be aware of things, and I do my very best to make them aware. And I tell them my feelings about LGBTQ and about interviews with youth, and I tell them that I give them my feelings and then allow them to live their life, and I can't be in control of them. So
you accept that you don't have full control. You keep the connection.
Because ultimately our connection and our love is more important than any belief that we have and that's what we've come to the conclusion, that is, I'm not going to lose our relationship with our kids over religion. That's more important to me.
It's just so important. Have you found that the quality of love in your family is improved when it's on this explicit foundation of unconditional love?
I think we're still working on that. I mean, I think some of our kids I feel like are completely there, and they're completely accepting of us unconditionally. And then I think others are still struggling a little bit, but I think they'll get
some
there.
of the believers maybe they're a little more distant or a little bit sad.
I think so. But I think that like there's no proper time frame. You can't tell people you have so many months to get it together and to start loving me unconditionally. Like some people can get there in a week, and some people it might take them 10 years, and that's okay. I'm going to let you, take all the time that you need to process it and feel all of those emotions, and hopefully at some point we can get there. So
Okay.
But by and large, I think that we're doing very well, and we can spend time together, and we love each other, and we have good times, and I think it's good.
And there's not too much of a sense of believers versus non-believers.
No.
It doesn't feel like a very thick bifurcation of the family
I mean,
dynamic.
there's definitely a little bit of that feel to it, but it's not like the dominant feeling for sure.
Well, that's good.
It used to be a strong feeling,
Wait,
in my
say
opinion.
that?
It used to be a strong feeling, in my opinion.
It was more kind of split.
Yeah.
What changed? How did it change?
I think just over time, we all kind of softened and we all kind of became more accepting of each other's beliefs.
So sometimes time heals.
Yeah, I think time definitely healed in our case.
Well, that's great.
I think sometimes that the non-believers don't fully understand the difficulty and the trauma that the believers have. And the believers obviously don't understand the trauma that we have. So we just have to understand that we don't completely understand each other.
That's a really good point. Like on the one hand, believers don't know what it's like to lose your faith. And so that's hard to feel misunderstood because the non-believers know what it's like to believe, but the believers don't know what it's like to lose your faith. On the other hand, the non-believers may not know what it's like to have believing members that you really looked up to lose their faith. Like there's a mourning and a grieving there that you probably didn't have to deal with, Jared, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to have your dad lose his faith, who is your idol and your bishop.
Exactly.
And your
It's
hero.
traumatic.
You have no idea how hard that probably is for your believing children to
I'm
go
sure
through.
it's kind of a betrayal because we've taught them this certain way their whole entire life, and then all of a sudden we're completely different with that belief.
Right.
Yeah, they definitely, I think they're getting over it, but felt the huge betrayal in the beginning. And I get that. Like, I felt that too. I remember telling him that, like, in tears, like, I feel like you've betrayed me.
Right. So they're dealing with that feeling of betrayal,
Yes.
that grief, disillusionment. It's got to be hard. But it sounds like things are going okay.
They are pretty good. Time and love, I think.
And they know you're doing this interview, right?
Yes.
I think most of them.
I think so.
And some people asked if you think your believing children will watch this full video or not.
We've invited them to,
Right.
so we'll see.
But I mean, there's live and then there's like watching it after.
Yes.
Do you think they will or not? Or
I think they will.
I think they will.
yeah.
I hope they will.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this is going to conclude parts 3 and 4 of the interview. Is there anything else you want to say about this? I think the final section will be the disciplinary council and thoughts around that and everything, and kind of the future. Go ahead,
I would like to talk about something.
please.
So honestly, like when I was leaving, I was mostly just struggling with like the changes that I was going through. And like leaving my tribe was also hard. Just knowing like I was disappointing them and I wasn't going to be a part of that anymore, that was hard. But honestly, it wasn't until recently that like I realized how sad I was that like I did lose my testimony. And I just kind of wanted to give like a shout out to the Youngs because it was their podcast that made me realize that.
So Leah and Brindley and Cody Young.
Yeah, just their whole story I related to, and just listening to Brindley talk about how much she loved the Mormon church. I just realized like how much I loved it and how much I loved my relationship with God and with Jesus Christ. And I really felt like that was a personal relationship. And I just started bawling when I was listening to that podcast, and I just like was really struggling with that. And I guess I'm still kind of coping like with that loss and making sense of that. But it was definitely listening to that podcast that I was able to like grieve that loss, I guess, that I never really done before.
And that was this year, right? That was...
Yeah, it was recently that we listened to it. It was like on the way home from a rugby game, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I felt like our children, like I felt like Jared and I have really processed it and grieved and whatever. And I feel like our kids were just like, oh, I'm just not Mormon anymore. And just like, it was no big deal. And then I think it's caught up to them. And our son, we've had to put him in counseling and everything.
The youngest?
Because there's a lot of trauma there. And if you just pretend like that didn't happen, that's not really very healthy. So, but we're dealing with it now and it's good.
Okay, so you're basically saying, Madison, that you thought you were just over it, but that it's actually been quite hard for you.
Yeah, I wanted to put Mormonism in my past just because everything just like sickened me, I guess, that I heard about some of the issues that I had with it, and I just wanted to put it in my past and just move on to this next life that I was having, I guess. And then I like really realized how hard it was on me.
Yeah. What have been the hardest things?
Well, like at the beginning, like I talked about, it was really just hard, like leaving the tribe and having to deal with my siblings and feeling that distance between us. That was definitely really hard. But as far as my testimony goes, just losing that relationship with Christ and like not knowing how to have a sure faith in any religion anymore. That is definitely something that's hard to grasp for me.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. That's super hard.
That's okay.
We'll come back to it at the end, but I think your point is that you're really grateful that the Youngs were willing to tell their story.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it did what for you? Helped you feel...
It just helped me grieve it.
Help you grieve. Mm-hmm. Help you process it.
Yeah.
Is that part of why you wanted to come on today?
Yeah.
To be that for some other people, maybe?
Yeah, that's what my mom told me, and so I said, okay.
So she twisted your arm. It's like, Brindley did it. Yeah. Brindley did it. So Madison.
Yeah.
The apple doesn't fall far from the Mormon tree. The Mormon guilt.
I know. And it didn't.
You've kept that. That's part of the buffet.
I know, and it's true.
That's part of the buffet you've kept.
That's one
true story.
That's one thing I told her, though, because Brindley was just so, like, she was so sweet and well-spoken and so innocent. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be as good of an example as her, but I'll do my best. Maybe somebody can relate to me.
Madison's pretty sassy.
No, you're lovely. And every single person, every adult, every youth, every family makes a contribution that no one else can make and reaches people that others can't reach. There will never be an end to these family transition stories. There'll never be an end to the need for them.
That's true.
Now, whether I'm always around to do them or other people pick up the mantle is a different question, but every story ends up finding its audience of people who need it. And you, Madison, will touch people just like Brindley did, just in different ways and different people.
And I couldn't guilt Hunter into doing it. So
Hunter, you're a slacker, but it's okay. We forgive you. Cool. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, I think I said everything.
Okay. Well, we're coming back, but...
Okay.
All right. Well, this concludes part 3 and 4 of our interview, and we're going to come right back and talk about the disciplinary council. But a huge thanks to the Lusks and to all of you who've tuned in so far. And don't go away. We'll come right back for part 5. Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 5 of our interview with Mormon Stories Podcast and the Jared, Gwen, and Madison Lusk family. We have 5 Lusks, 5 Lusk children who weren't able to join us, and some in-laws as well. But we're grateful you have joined us. And we've spent this time learning about the Lusks and their upbringing, Jared serving as bishop, how Jared lost his faith, how Jared and Gwen endured a mixed faith marriage, how Madison and the other kids found out, and how they've come to a pretty healthy and solid place as the Lusk family, dealing with a mixed faith family and the erosion and evaporation of their faith, which was the basis of their lives, and how they're rebuilding. So thank you guys so much so far. Thanks to everyone who's been joining us on Facebook Live. It's been great to have your comments and questions. Let's jump to the disciplinary council and kind of how it all started, because, and I'm just going to reiterate what we've already said, like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault, Jared, that the church hid this information from you, and you also, Gwen. It's not your fault that the church hid this information. It's not your fault that whatever Joseph Smith did or didn't do or lied or deceived, the polygamy, the scriptures, the truth claims, none of this is your fault. You didn't know this stuff. And to put a double edge to it, you learn about this stuff through the church's own essays that they put out. So, and you've given your whole lives to the church, 45, 50 years you've given in church service. So for me, that just, you do that math, and it's like, these people just deserve to be left alone. They deserve to be supported, respected, and given space and love and compassion and the ultimate farthings of kindness and patience by people who call themselves servants of Jesus, like followers of Jesus. Like, if ever there was a place for Christ-like love and patience and forbearance, it should be priesthood leaders of the Lusk family, and just saying, do what you have to do to grieve. We love you. We're here for you. We'll serve you. We'll respect you. But we're certainly not going to harass and try and come after you, right? I mean, that's my editorializing. Maybe that's what's happened. Maybe not. So how have you guys gotten to where you are? Take us through the story of what's led to a disciplinary council. And we can start with the bishop that followed you, and or your stake president, or anything else.
Okay, we got called in April of 2018 by our stake president and his first
So that's
counselor.
the same year, same month you lost your faith.
Yeah, so this is all happening at that
A
time.
year ago, basically.
And they just called us in to release us from our calling as mission prep people. And so at that time, I told Gwen, okay, this is the opportunity that I have. I'm going to tell them about my faith crisis. I'm going to spill the beans so that they know, because at this point, everybody was wondering what's going on with Bishop Lusk, because he was skipping Sunday school and priesthood, and we'd go on vacations and we wouldn't come back for church. We'd make sure we travel on Sunday so we didn't have to go to church. And so everybody was talking about us and worried about us. And so they called us in to release us from that. And that's when I told them that I told them to begin with that I've always had a little bit of a struggle with my testimony of God, and that was difficult for me. And then I've studied the Gospel Topics Essays, and I've come to the conclusion that Joseph Smith is not a prophet, and that's really, really bothered me. And
So you're telling your stake president this
yes,
in your interview to be released?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry, and you just said this, but I was typing something. So this was like you asked them for an interview because you wanted to be released? Or?
No, they called us in because they were going to release us from the calling.
Okay, so they didn't have any clue.
I don't think so.
Okay, so April 2018, they're just calling you in to release you, and you decide then that you want to have this conversation.
Yes,
How did you decide beforehand you were going to have this conversation?
I did. As soon as they sent me a text and said they wanted to meet with us, then I told Gwen that I'm going to do it today. I'm going to tell them my testimony, lack of, and my faith crisis, and I'm going to tell them everything. And
Gwen, when he said he was going to do this, were you like, "Oh, great, that's awesome"? Or
No.
were you like, "No,
I
don't
was
do it,
panicked.
don't do it, no,
Yeah.
don't
I was
do
panicked, yeah, because I still hadn't completely come to the conclusion that
it"? You weren't sure.
I wasn't sure. I was
yeah.
still in doubt. Like, I had serious doubts, but I didn't have my assurity.
And we just have to pause here, because this is like one of the huge things I deal with couples who've lost their faith. It's like, do I want to become a project? Do I want to be viewed as a threat by the bishop and stake? Do I want to be talked about in bishop's council? Could this impact my career? I'm a dentist. Could we lose clients over this? Could my kids be affected? Will they lose friends? Do we want to be viewed as pariahs in the ward? Do we want to be viewed? Do we want to potentially face disciplinary counsel? Like, there's so much going into the implications for coming clean, being open and honest and vulnerable with your bishop and stake president, that I caution couples to be very careful. And that they don't have to feel an obligation to ever be honest and open at all. That it's frankly nobody's business. It's not an act of dishonesty to just keep things private. And there's so much potentially at risk that the general advice I give couples is not to tell your priesthood leadership anything, to just say something very vague like, hey, we're going through some stuff, everything's fine. You know, we just need some space. And if you don't see us or if you see a distancing, we're great. We love the church. And we just ask you to respect us, not make us a project and kind of leave us alone. And we will let you know as soon as we're feeling ready to re-engage. I just gave like the 1 minute version of what I spend hours counseling couples to do in our coaching. So that was kind of a coaching moment. So having said all that, you know, did you think about any of that before you decided, or was it just like, I got to be honest, I got to be truthful, got to tell them everything?
Some of those thoughts did cross my mind, but honestly, I didn't feel like I had a choice because the position that I was in the stake, and, you know, they looked up to me and I knew I was on their radar for other callings, and I was never going to get out of it, I felt. And so I felt like I had to just let them know, because I'm sure some other calling was coming. And so I couldn't just keep burying this and hiding it from people. I had to come clean, I felt.
Yeah, because I tried all that, tried to get him not to come.
You did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was wise. Okay, one more thing. There's something in between these two positions, because there's just saying, hey, I know that you may be inclined to want to give me other callings. I just want to let you know right now, we just kind of are needing a break. So if you have me or her in mind for other callings, I'm just going to tell you that we need to kind of take ourselves off the list for callings, but not because we hate anyone or don't love the church, but just because right now that's not something we can do in our lives. But there's no problems. I'm not into porn. I'm not cheating on anyone. Like, we just need space. So you can still do that without telling them you think Joseph Smith's a liar and a fraud. But did you even consider that?
No.
Okay.
And I don't know. I think I had been to the point, because it had been 2 years that and so I was 100% completely done. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't even do a little tiny bit of faking or anything. I just wanted it out there to know.
You just wanted it out there.
Yeah.
So it's authenticity over everything. And we could talk about whether that's smart or wise or necessary, but that's what you chose to do.
That's what I chose to do.
Okay, so you said
I knew it was going to be hard. It was super, super hard. Because
this is the stake president.
Yeah, I visited with him one-on-one for a long time in lots of interviews while I was bishop. And so it was a shock. I know it was a huge shock to him. I honestly feel like he has a great deal of love for me, and I did for him too. And I do for him.
Which makes it harder for him, not easier.
Exactly.
He loves you.
Exactly. And so I told him all of the struggles that I had and why I didn't believe
And were you
it.
in the room, Gwen? Or
Yes.
So you were both there.
Yes.
And you just start like going down the CES letter list. Is that right? How did
Not
it go?
too much. He mentioned just his struggles with God, and then also
with Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon and the Book of Abraham. And so I didn't talk a lot about it, but I felt like they didn't know how to handle it. And I can understand that a little bit. So I have some sympathy for him. But
was it multiple people, or
it was him and her brother-in-law, or my brother-in-law, however you want to say it, who was the first counselor in the stake presidency.
So why was there two? Normally it's just the stake president.
I don't know. That's just, they kind of do it like that. I don't know.
they're a pretty
At least
good
with
team.
us, they are always together.
Yeah.
With us, they're always together.
So it was the stake president and the counselor, who happens to be your brother-in-law?
Yes.
Your sister's husband?
Yes.
Ooh, that's awkward.
It's hard.
And did they have a heads up at all?
No.
Oh my gosh.
They were blindsided.
So there's family in the room.
Yes.
And you're telling the stake president. So you're listing things off. How was that received? What did they say?
They were in shock, and he just kept pleading for me, can you please come in and work with me, and I'll visit with you as much as and we can make this work. And it was never going to happen.
I did that. I spent a year meeting weekly with my stake president.
I knew that
he tried to rehabilitate me.
They didn't have the answers, and they never would. And it was like helping me believe in Santa Claus again once I decided that Santa Claus. And so I knew it was not going to work. So I told him no, and
You're just like, I don't want to waste anyone's time.
Exactly. And he asked me at that point, do you believe that I was called of God? And I know what he was trying to get and everything because I had said that before and I had, and so he wanted me to say yes, but I said no. Because obviously if I didn't believe in Joseph Smith and the whole restoration, then it just goes, nothing else is going to...
By extension,
I don't believe that you are called of God. And so...
That's really direct.
It was, and that's how I am. And he knows that's how I am. That's how I always have been with him.
Yeah.
And so at that point, he told me that he read me the interview questions for the temple and said, I'm going to have to take your recommend. And I didn't have it with me. It was out in the car. So I had to leave to go out to the car and get my temple recommend and give it to him. And that was hard.
Okay. So on the one hand, having the temple recommend interviews and having those questions and asking them to you and making sure that you're worthy to go to the temple, that's reasonable. That's like, yeah, you don't want unworthy people to be in there. If you don't believe it, you shouldn't go in there. On the other hand, I imagine that might have felt really offensive and hard, and you didn't believe, so why would you even want it? So I sense that was really hard for you, even though you didn't necessarily you didn't believe in the church anymore. Talk about that.
Yeah, it was hard for me for two reasons. One is that in my mind, I was ever been as worthy as I ever had been.
You didn't like the worthiness of it.
Yeah, that's not. I didn't believe certain things, and that's fine. I honestly feel with all of my heart, and I still will say this every time, that had I only not believed or had a struggle with my belief in God, that I would have got my temple recommend and it would have been fine. But since I didn't have a belief in Joseph Smith and the priesthood, then that's where they draw the line. And I think that's wrong. I think in my mind, and I could be wrong, but I think the church reverences, and it's more important that you have a testimony of Joseph Smith than of God.
Yeah.
And so then the other difficult thing is I knew it was hard on Gwen.
Yeah, because that was my fear, and I watched it play out before my eyes.
What was your fear?
That I would be at the temple without him, because they asked me those questions, and I said, do you believe that Joseph restored whatever? He can quote it word for word. And I said, I don't know. I hope. I don't. Right now, I don't know. And so they let me keep mine.
Oh.
So I had mine, and he didn't have his. And when he laid it on the table, it broke me. It was incredibly sad. Incredibly sad.
He had to go out to the car to get it.
Yeah,
and then he brings it back.
Yeah.
And lays it on the table.
Yeah.
And that was what for you?
It was heartbreaking. Like it, just like all my worst fears were coming to pass. Like it was happening right before my eyes.
It's almost like a spiritual wedge. Like at that moment, they just stuck a spiritual wedge between you two.
Yes.
And between us and them.
Right.
And so we left that.
No, tell him what else he said.
Oh, and so
hold the mic.
After
put your arm around so that the other arm around it so that the mic's
After that conversation, right before we left, his parting words were, "You can get closer to God by reading the Book of Mormon than any other thing. So I encourage you to read the Book of Mormon." Well, I had just told him that I don't believe in the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, and that was the advice that he gives me, is to read the Book of Mormon and something quote Joseph Smith. So I felt like he was not even listening to me really, and he couldn't. And I don't totally blame him, but because that's all he knows. But I think that there's other ways to deal with people who have faith crises. If they don't believe in the Book of Mormon, don't tell them to read the Book of Mormon. There's other ways I think that you can accept people, and because once you don't believe those things, I feel like you're kind of ostracized from the church, and there's no place for you at all. So
in other mainstream Christian churches, believe or don't believe in some or all or none, and they're very flexible.
There's not room for that in the church at this point. Right. And that's part of the reason I want to be so vocal, is because I think there's a lot of people in that situation, and there needs to be room and acceptance for these people.
Well, that's what's hard. Part of what's hard about this is the ecclesiastical roulette element, because there are Mormon bishops and stake presidents who will let you have a temple recommend if you're an atheist. They'll let you have a temple recommend if you don't believe in polygamy, or if you don't believe in the Book of Mormon being historical, or if you don't believe that Joseph Smith, this is the one true church. You can find lots of bishops and stake presidents who would. And so part of it is you just got a bishop that was more literal. But I think part of it was, and this is with Cody and Leah Young and others, it's when somebody deeply well-respected in the ward and the stake lose their faith, you're not just an average member. You're like more, doesn't matter how much you've given. It's almost like all that you've given now counts against you. And you're perceived as like dangerous.
Exactly.
Because of the level of respect that you have. And so it's like, we got to cut them off. We got to brand them. We have to deface or demean them in front of the rest of the community, or this may really spread. So, I mean, they must have been terrified.
And I think that's true. And I didn't visit with my bishop at all about this. One time after all of this I did, but I just went straight to the stake president and I dealt directly with him. So we left that meeting, and then we wrote an email to all of our family members and sent that to all of our family members explaining our faith crisis and everything.
Okay, wait. So how did you leave? Was it combative? How did you leave? Did you tell them you're mad? Were they nice to you? Were they mean? The brother-in-law? What was the emotional parting that, was it like, were they threatening you? Was it just a plea?
No.
Did you?
I didn't feel good when I left. I didn't feel loved, really.
No, I didn't either. I felt like it took a turn when he said that no, he didn't believe he was called of God. That the emotion in the room turned at that point.
It's like you're for us or against us. Oh, you're no longer with us. So what?
Yeah. So I was devastated and I was sad, but then by the time I got to the car, then I started to get angry, and I decided, you know what?
Because what?
Because they took his temple recommend. Like, that's your answer to helping him, is to take his temple recommend. How about you send him to the celestial room to pray about this? I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, why from a believing perspective, why take away one of the most important spiritual resources a Mormon might have?
Yes, like
you want them in the temple more than ever.
Yeah, like that's what I didn't get. Why he didn't like encourage him to go to the temple and to pray and to like remember the covenants he's made, or like anything. Like, to me that just seemed like the completely wrong answer to give him. And then
something punitive.
Yeah, and then he was being,
especially on the first meeting.
Yes, he was being
like in the first hour.
Yeah, he's being disciplined and he's giving terrible advice. Like, he didn't hear us at all.
So they didn't listen. Very punishing.
Yeah, and I was angry. So I was like, I'm done with fair. And I opened up the CES letter and I started reading it, and it was devastating to me because I wanted it to be true. I wanted to keep my life, and I was so sad, so incredibly sad. Like, I literally couldn't get off the couch for like 2 weeks. I was just like, it completely broke me. It was awful. And then I wrote the email to my family. Well, I came out to my sister, and my mom, and I just could not take that emotional trauma anymore. So I just, sent the rest of my family an email.
So ironically, their severe reaction to your husband was what pushed you to jump into the brink of no longer believing.
Yes.
If they had been more compassionate, more flexible, they might have kept you as a believer.
Yes.
Maybe.
I was on pretty. I think I told them that I was on rocky ground when they asked me about Joseph Smith.
They threw a couple. They had a couple rocks.
They just like swooped all the rocks out from underneath me, so I fell.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh. And so that was hard. So that's when you really.
Yeah, that's when I just dug deep and went down the rabbit hole, and yeah, when
was that dark for you?
It was so dark. Like,
yeah.
I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I would wake up in the night when I could finally go to sleep, like in a panic, just like, oh my gosh, it's not true. Like, I've lived my whole life and it's not true. Like, it was the worst part of my life, worst thing I've ever been through.
How long was it that hard?
It was probably that hard until I told my parents.
So April 2018 to what?
It was probably that's only a month.
So it was a really, really hard month.
Really hard month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I lost 10 pounds. Like, I want to lose those 10 pounds back again, but
Not that way.
It was devastating. Absolutely.
It's no fun to lose 10 pounds that way.
No, it's not.
and it comes back.
Yeah, it comes back.
I'm so sorry.
So, yeah.
What was it like, Jared, to watch her go through that?
It was super hard. And then because of that email.
I mean, you got to be torn because on the one hand, she's joining you.
Right.
On the other hand, her world's falling apart and you care about her, right?
Exactly.
And he didn't get dinner for a long time.
Let's order it out again. It's Domino's again.
So she got called in because of that email because they were worried about her testimony.
Okay, wait. So, sorry. So you wrote an email to who?
To all my family. So it went to my sister.
And they're all in Durango, like Farmington area? Like, where are they around?
No, all of my sisters live within probably 30 miles of me.
So that's an existential threat to the ward and stake. It's that,
Yes.
right?
So
they're all Mormons.
they are. My sister is the only one in my stake.
Okay.
But so the two surrounding stakes around me.
Okay.
They are. And my brothers, they one lives in Colorado Springs, and the other two live here in Utah.
Okay.
So
Okay, so you send that letter. What does that have to do with your leaders, though? So you send the email or whatever.
So because my brother-in-law's in the stake, then he got it.
Okay, got
I
it.
sent it to my sister, and of course, she shared it with him.
And
which
again,
you would
I
expect.
tell people when they ask me, do I write the email? I just say no. Just say, keeping it very vague. It's just like, hey, our relationship with the church is changing. We love the church. We love you. We'll never do anything to ever harm anyone's faith. So we're great not talking about why. Please don't ask us why. But no, we'll never challenge your faith.
Yeah, so that would have been really great advice.
Do you now wish the email had said something like that, or are you at peace with what you wrote?
I'm at peace. I feel like it was good. I mean, I feel like it caused a lot of trauma.
What did you
to
say? So
everybody.
what did you say in the email?
I just said something like, I no longer believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet.
Yeah.
And, this is just the beginning of my faith journey, and I don't know where it's going to take me. Maybe it'll bring me full circle. But please don't think that it's because, I've sinned or I'm looking for the easy way out, or it was because I wasn't faithful enough, because I said that feels dismissive to me of the way I've lived my life the last 45 years, to blame it on these things like this.
Trivial things.
Yes.
Insulting, demeaning things.
Yeah. And so that's basically what I said, that this was the most devastating thing in my life. And
so what was the response?
So a couple of my brothers had no response.
That's called the crickets response, and that's the most common response to these emails.
And it was sad, but
Why was it sad?
just because I'm pouring my heart out, and you can't even say, "Hey Gwen, I'm sorry you're going through this. I love you." Was that really hard to say? I mean, I hope that's how you feel.
Or I love you no matter what.
Yeah, something
nothing will
like that.
change, right?
Yeah. But everybody else reached out in love and said those things.
Okay.
So I appreciated that.
Okay, so there was some positive response.
Yes, and my parents were absolutely phenomenal. Amazing.
They were on that email thread.
Well, I had told them in person through
Right.
lots of tears and heartache.
And so what was their response?
The crazy thing is that the rumors had already gone around. So I've in my faith crisis 1 month, and they had already heard.
So meaning your brother-in-law told them?
Not him, but it was somebody told somebody told somebody told somebody
So the
told
Mormon
him.
telephone
Yes.
network gossip
Yes.
chain.
No, he did not tell. He did not divulge my confidence.
Okay. So your parents knew before you told them.
Yeah.
But you told them, and
Yeah.
they were lovely.
They were lovely. They said that there's, that they could see how devastated I was and how sad I was. And so they just wanted me to know that they loved me no matter what, that their love was unconditional. And so.
What an amazing,
good.
and you didn't expect that response?
I don't know what you expect. You're just so afraid, to disappoint somebody,
Yeah.
It's just, I don't.
And they were how old at that point?
My dad would have been 73, and my mom's 70,
Okay.
74, 70,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. It's just hard to disappoint your parents. And you were probably used to being like the apple of their eye,
Oh,
right?
yes.
The daughter that was
Yes.
inspiring, and the bishop's daughter.
Yes.
And 6 kids. And
Yeah. Well, and all of my siblings are super fabulous like that. We all are
one of those.
we're one of those families. So, yeah. But it was hard to let them down. And and I had to have the conversation about the excommunication this week, and they were still just as lovely. And they don't understand, but they said that there's nothing I can do that, will make them stop loving me. So they're amazing. I really got blessed with good parents.
Okay, so when you sent out that email, you said there were ecclesiastical implications then?
Well, because my brother-in-law saw that, and I was supposed to go to girls' camp, and so he called me in to release me from that. They did not want me to go to girls' camp. And then he said something that you said in that email really bothered me. You said you didn't believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. Before, when we talked to you, you said that you were trying to believe. So you don't believe now? And I said, no, I don't. And so he took my recommend.
In a meeting?
Yeah.
It was you and your brother-in-law alone?
I was
No,
there.
he was there as well.
Jared was there.
Yes.
But no stake president.
No.
That's kind of weird to have the brother-in-law interrogating you, like a family member.
No, I think that he was asked to do that by the stake president.
That's a little weird.
To release
I'm just
me
saying, like,
from the
separate the family.
Yeah.
I
feel
mix
like,
dual relationships.
Yeah, I feel like they put him in a difficult position.
Because that's not
So-
good for family, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I try to be understanding about it, just because I know what it's like to watch somebody lose their faith, but it still hurts.
So that, I'm guessing that can't be good for your relationship with your brother-in-law.
I try to everybody has to live their life so that they can sleep at night. And so if his number one loyalty is to the church, and that's how he's going to sleep at night, then he needs to do what he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do I agree with his moral code? Probably not. But is it? Do I want to be his best friend right now? Probably not. But is that going to be permanent? It's not going to be. Time will heal everything, and it'll be okay.
So he took your temple recommend, and were you like, I don't want it, or were you like, this?
No,
is
I was
hurtful?
angry.
Why? Did you still want to go?
No.
Did kind of.
Go ahead, talk.
yeah.
Madison, take the.
Well, like I was saying before, she was like, "Oh, I'm still gonna try to not drink tea or coffee," and she was like, "We can still go to church every now and then. We can still like we were still gonna go to stuff."
You're right.
You know what? I stayed Mormon for. I stayed Mormon for 13 years after I stopped believing, and I still tried to get a temple recommend and tried to go to the temple as much as I could, wore my garments forever. I get it.
Yeah.
I would have had those feelings.
Yeah. So Madison is right.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Madison. Thanks
That's
for
right.
keeping her honest.
That's exactly what I was planning to do, because I didn't ever want my kids to have a temple wedding that I couldn't be at, and so I was just going to keep wearing my garments, keep living my life exactly how I always had.
And that should be okay in Mormonism, right? Like if somebody doesn't believe a lick of it, but they want to follow it,
Right.
why would the church ever do anything to keep anyone out, right? It doesn't
That
make
makes
any
no
sense
sense.
to me.
Yeah. So Jared didn't feel like he could, live his life like that. Like he wouldn't have tried to keep a temple recommend, but I would have tried.
Yeah. Okay, so so not only is a leader taking that away from you, it's your brother-in-law taking that away from you, takes the temple recommend away, you feel gutted.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was angry.
Did you
Yes.
tell him that, or did you just leave kind of stewing?
I
or-
think that it was a little bit slow, because when I was in there talking to him, I was like, well, I guess you do what you need to do.
Yeah, you don't really want to be confrontational.
No, and that's not my personality. But then as I was processing it, I was like, really? He's protecting the temple from me? Like, why?
Like you're Mike Norton, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Hi,
didn't.
Mike. No offense. No offense.
Yeah, I just didn't understand it, and it just hurt. It was painful.
Yeah. Yeah. Every other place in Christianity, if you're there, you're welcome. Like if you want to be there, you're welcome. There isn't this inquisition around belief, and we're just immature that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your position is just, I'm sure they viewed it as threatening. Because I'm sure you were just as respected.
Well, and I argued with him a little bit. I said, but I'm living my life worthy. And he said, but you can't answer these questions. And so I don't know. I just felt like that I deserved a temple recommend. I didn't feel like I was unworthy of one.
Yeah. And so Mormon Church, as your unpaid consultant, treat people who lose their faith differently, because you radicalize them as enemies. Not that you're an enemy, but when you mistreat people who otherwise have good feelings for the church and would even want to stay engaged, when you create an inquisition and then punish them, and you create enemies when you otherwise would have friends. And why would you want to create enemies? Like, it's bad. So stop it. It's dumb. It's not good for you, and it hurts others. So